Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to Kottabos Space Program, where today we are having a look at yet another fun mod, this time in the form of Infernal Robotics, which is being made by Magic Smoke Industries, and boy, this is a mod that I've been meaning to cover for ages, but on this series I tend to review and take a look at either newly released mods or at the very least ones that have been recently updated, and whenever this one came around to be updated I just seem to have missed it, but thankfully a couple of days ago it was brought up to version 0.20, which fixed a lot of bugs, added in a really new cool feature, as well as some UI changes which were, I think, necessary. So let's just head on into the spaceplane hangar and see what this mod's all about, which, of course, since it is a robotics mod, which you could hopefully tell by the name Infernal Robotics, let's grab a remote guidance unit, because, well, robots need to be placed on robots, in my opinion. Always good. And head on over to this glorious tab here, a feature of this mod that I wish every mod had: a custom tab. This is a great little part because it is a tab purely for robotic parts, as these parts you can actually find in other tabs, such as this adjustable rail you can actually find in the utility tab as well. And basically how this works is whatever part it is, no matter if it's in utility, science, or even structural, as long as it's also tagged as a robotics part, it'll come into here, which is great because this mod, Infernal Robotics, is predominantly made as a plugin for other modders to go hog wild with to make crazy things. It does have these legacy parts that we will be taking a little look at here, basically to show you what you can do with the mod, and then other modders expand upon it with mods such as the modular frame system, or the mobile frame system rather, that we looked at recently, the Dromamine Robotics, that's another one. I think there's also the model rework and expansion, particularly for this one, that adds in all sorts of new robotic parts. And all of those mods, when you bring them into the game, their robotic parts should get populated in this robotic parts tab, which is great because that just makes navigation a whole heck of a lot easier, which can be an issue if you have a tendency to install a lot of mods into your game. Now let's take a look at these parts. Again, as I said, these are legacy parts that are meant to be here as, you know, just basic standard parts rather, that you know, to teach you how to use this mod and get some basic functionality. And we have, to start here, an adjustable rail, which is, well, a rail that's adjustable. It slides back and forth like a piston does, and it's a handy little mod. Perhaps attach it to the side of your craft to extend a scientific equipment up into the air, maybe, or other potential uses, of course. We then have a closed powered hinge, which is quite nice, very book-looking, of course. It is a hinge, starts closed, becomes open. We then have a docking washer standard and a docking washer standard free-moving. And, well, these are washers that you dock to, and they move. That's every part in this moves. That's kind of the point of this mod. So let's just pop those back away. We then have two different gantries, a Gantry Rail, which this one, the gantry part, or I don't exactly know what that middle part would be called. It moves along the rail, and this one, the variant, that part seems to be stationary and the rail moves. Seems to be the difference between those two, though that could also just be me building things incorrectly when I was testing them. Always a possibility with me. We then also have a hydraulic cylinder, well, which is a cylinder that's hydraulic. If you don't know what one of those are, where have you been your whole life? I don't know. We then have a Rota Tron, which rotates. We actually showed this off on the mobile frame system mod that we took a look at recently. It spins. We attached a little cab piece to it for our attempt at building a crane, and yeah, it spins. That's what it does. We then have a larger version, which is huge. Look at that thing. Dear sweet Jeb, that is big. And yeah, they spin. That's what they do. We then have another hinge, much like the closed hinge, but this one starts open and closes. That's the point of that one. We then have a powered hinge, which is, more of a, back and forth sort of hinge. One very similar that starts at 90 degrees. We then have a telescopic piston, which, once again, is just a different variation on a piston, though, I probably should point out this. Between these two pistons, this one sort of extends, this is the base, and that extends outwards. On this one, it's sort of the opposite. It's more meant to, what's the best way to put this? This one pushes stuff. Well, they both push stuff. Oh god, that's a horrible way to explain that. But basically on this one, the main internal part is what stays and the outer moves. This one seems to be the opposite. The internal part moves and the outer part stays. That's the best I can explain it. It's a little wonky. And then we have a VTOL rotor, and on this one you attach it to the side of your aircraft and then attach the engine to the bottom here, and it moves along this axis so you can have your engine pointing in different angles. Always good, always handy. Now, to actually play around with these things, let's grab this powered hinge and see how this all works. Now, basically, what you do is, first off, and basically a good first step, click and actually open the servo configuration button here. You click that and you get this lovely little panel, and since we have one part, it's thrown into here in its own first grouping. So we have this new group here and this new door hinge, and we can rename these to whatever we want, to just randomly clicking about and name them. And this is so that you can more easily organize your parts as well as control them. So what? Okay, let's see if we can explain this well. This part, the servo, we can control this manually, clicking these arrows to move the servo to open and close it. We can also control it in the group, but if we use these buttons, it will also do that same movement for any other servo in the group. So this is to control it individually. This is to control multiple things together. That's essentially how that works. Good to remember. And using that, you can make some really cool stuff by putting multiple servos into one thing and having them all move at the same time. For instance, a good way to look at this is if you had your own custom wheels for a rover, say 4 of them, that you have opening, other button, opening off from the main body of the rover to actually plant your wheels on the ground. Now, you could just do one of them or have all 4 wheels all in one group and move all 4 of those at once to lower or raise those wheels. That'd be a good way to put it. And yeah, that's how you basically control things and split them into groups to make life a bit easier. Now, as for the buttons that we have on here, first we'll look at the servo. This, as you've seen, is basic movement. We can increase the movement or decrease the movement. That is how it works. And we can also reset it to its original zeroed position using this button here. Now that's how you've had to control things for as long as this mod has been around. You just use the arrow keys, or also potentially you can actually set your own configurable keys here for your keyboard to custom controls. And you had to control them manually by either these buttons or key commands. And that's how you did things. But not now. Not now. We also have the option of doing presets, and that is where this button comes into play. When we open this, we can add into this individual servo different presets for it to have and be able to select. So if we add that one, that preset will be 0 degrees. We'll add another one that's 45 and another one that's 90. Oh, that went up to 80 there. 90. There we go, 90. And we can hit apply symmetry and it'll organize these from lowest to highest number. And that, with this now, we can move from here. These 2 buttons. These 2 buttons here will move you from one preset to another, though we should probably save and exit first. So we're at 0. Our first preset was 45 degrees. our second preset was 90 degrees. And we can hit this button here, which resets it, and you'll notice it went back to 45. If we open this preset back up, you'll see this button here on this column. This selects the default, so it defaults to whatever is sort of the middle number, but you can change it to whatever. So we can set that as our default, save and exit, and now when we reset, it goes back to 90, or alternatively, we could have the default be the 90 degrees, and then reset it, and that is technically our zeroed position. That is the default for this instrumentation, and that's what you use. And this is great because you can just set them to you have all sorts of presets in here of different positions, and you can either move between them in here, going one by one, resetting it, of course, or using these buttons here. So right now we're at 90. If we wanted to go back to 0, normally we'd have to use these buttons here and click back to 45 and then click to 0. Or, alternatively, we could click one of the buttons in this column. So we're at 0 right now. We can force it to go all the way to the 90 by clicking this, or all the way back down to 0 clicking this. And that gives you a lot more control than you had before and makes your life a whole lot easier. So now, instead of having to manually hold down this button, you can just go, no, I want it 0. There we go. You're good. And of course, we can add as many presets as we like in here and then delete them with the lovely little delete preset X. Very nice indeed. Save and exit that. And that's your base controls for your individual servos. Now, as for up here in the groups, you have the same movement keys, the same reset, which it will reset these to whatever its default position is. So if we had another one of these hinges that was set to 0, that one would be set to 0, this one would be set to 90, as those would be the defaults. We then also have this advanced settings button, which if we click that, we get this little extra row of things below our servo. And that, basically what this is the range, how far it can move. So right now, this hinge can go from 0 to 180 degrees. We could change this if we wanted to, so that it only had a maximum of 80. And now, if we go back in presets to 45, oh, that will still go to 90. Let's see if we can stop it at the 80 mark. Yes, there we go. If we manually control it, it'll stop at 80. But if the presets are set there, it will go all the way to 90. We can also change the speed and how fast these movements happen, as well as the acceleration to that speed. And we can also invert the controls if we so desired, and you can see that changed the coloring there to yellow to show that is indeed inverted. Now, these settings can either be accessed here by this little cog button, or by right-clicking on any one of the robotic parts. We have all the same controls here, or you can even lock it so it doesn't move at all. We can also do that later on outside when we're in the normal world. And so that's the basics of how servos are controlled. Now I'm going to open up a crappy little mechanism that I made earlier that is, well, first and foremost, crappy. I mean, look at this thing. It's horrible. But it's a basic, oh god, I don't even know what you would call this as a mechanism. But it uses the gantry to go back and forth. It has a Rota Tron to spin this whole bit, this hinge to bend the piston back and forth, and then the piston, of course, extends and retracts itself. And in our servo configuration, I have each of these on its own group, just because we have our gantry group, our rotator group, our hinge group, and our piston group. But if I wished, I could throw any of these into any of the other groupings, and of course have set presets for all of them. And we'll get on to why you might throw multiple things into one grouping once we're outside. But yes, this should be good to go, so let's launch. Oh yes, I was playing around with this earlier to make sure it worked, so need to clear that one off the runway. Oh boy, it works! It ain't pretty, but it works. And yes, this is an interesting little mechanism to show you what you can do with Infernal Robotics. Now, again, we have that little robot arm button here. We just click that, and we get this lovely UI, which is our servo controller. And you'll see we have our groupings here, so that gantry, rotator, hinge, and piston groups that I had for this. And if we click these, it'll expand open to show the part. So we have the gantry with the gantry rail, and we have the rotator with the new Rota Tron, the hinge with the new hinge, and the piston with the new cylinder. And so that is our individual parts, and if you had more parts in each of these groupings, they would also be there as well. Now you notice a few things. That is yellow, meaning that currently this part is idle. That is its current position, so right now everything's set to 0. And then we have all these lovely controls. So let's actually just sort of collapse these. And so right now, this controls the entire grouping, and much like how it was in the spaceplane hangar, we manually have to hold down these buttons to move this back and forth. We do also have a toggle button, so I can click that and it'll just keep on going until I click it again to stop it. And same way going in the other direction. Or of course, hit the stop button, it completely stops. We also have the reset one, which will set it back to its start position. And yeah, that is how you control things. And that, again, used to be your only way to control stuff. But now we also have presets, which you can hit this button for, and it changes these controls from manual to presets. And now, if we click that one, this will go back to the 0 position. Now it should go over to 2, I believe, is what I had for the grouping. Yes, there we go. So it was midway down the gantry. Now if I hit it again, it goes all the way to the end of the gantry as 4. And that's what I had as the presets for this. Now, as I said earlier in there, that's also kind of an issue, because if I want to go back all the way to the other side, I have to wait until this hits 2, which it will right now. Then I have to click it to go to 0, and then I have to click it to go to -2, and then I have to click it again to go to 4. Now that is kind of annoying, but if we open this up, which again, we have those same controls in here for the individual servo, so we can move it back and forth as we desire, and we can open up the presets. Now we can still edit these just like we could in the spaceplane hangar. We can move these around, make them different values, add symmetry, change which one is our default, or of course tell it to go from the current 0 position all the way to 4, or alternatively to go from wherever it is here all the way to the -4, and that's a very, very handy thing. So you no longer have to hold down manually to rotate it to where you want it to go, or by annoyingly clicking between presets. You just click in the far direction that you want to go to, and it will go there. And of course, we can control different groupings as we're going along, so I turned the Rota Tron, moved the piston, and also angled the hinge, and we can move these around and do all sorts of other crazy things, moving these between their various presets. And so you have individual control over each. It's very handy, very nice. But what if on the fly you decide, well, I don't like these individual groupings, I'd like to combine things together or add new ones? We can hit this button, and you can control your servo groups just like you could in the spaceplane hangar. We have our gantry, we have our gantry rail inside of the gantry group, etc. And if, say, I want the piston to be inside the gantry group, I can just click and drag that right on up. And now, here's the fun thing. If we move between presets, it will control, for the grouping, if we move between presets, it will control both of these servos. So right now I can move them independently, moving them between presets, which this one only has 2, either 0 or 1.3, which is extended. And that is all this thing does. This gantry, of course, has a multitude of different presets. So if we reset it back to 0, and put them both to 0 here to sort of show off this a little bit better, we can close that. So we can still control them each individually, as mentioned, or together. So if we hit this next preset group for the gantry, it will change both the gantry rail and the cylinder at the same time. Now imagine what you could do with that. If you had, say, a robotic arm that you had multiple servos moving to, do a specific rotation or a specific maneuver that you need, you can do that all together. And if we say throw the Rota Tron into here as well, and move it this way, it's now extending the piston, turning the Rota Tron, and moving the gantry all from the controls of one grouping. So that's what you can do with that. So you can either put them into individual groups just to organize things, or move them all into specific groups to do stuff together. And just imagine that with changing the different presets, you could do some really interesting sort of fine-tune automation of your servos using these groupings. It's very cool with the grouping and the presets. Very nice. Now, I said earlier with the yellow, that was showing that it was idle. I really didn't explain that too great. Green is active, and we can also lock it so that this servo doesn't work anymore, and that is red. Probably a good thing to show off there. And we can, of course, lock or unlock, invert the controls just like we could in the spaceplane hangar. And, of course, you can right-click these to adjust this stuff on the fly here as well. All very cool, all very fun, and just, again, imagine what all you can do with this Infernal Robotics between the presets, the groupings, or individual servo controls. You could do just nearly anything you can imagine, as long as you have the right robotic parts, which there are a huge load of robotic parts out there split between all sorts of other mods. So yes, that is going to be it for this episode. If you would like to check this out for yourself, you can follow the link in the description as always. And of course, I hope you do go and check it out. It is very, very fun, and this new update, the UI is better, the presets are amazing, and bugs have been fixed. So all in all, a great improvement to this mod, and a necessity for anyone who wants to do some crazy robotics, and, well, quite frankly, the only way to do crazy robotics in the game at the moment. But yes, I do hope you have enjoyed this episode, and of course, that you come back for the next. But until then, thank you for watching, my friends, and as always, have a good one.